Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. We're going to be talking about all of the books that I've read up to this point this year, so it's kind of like a quarterly wrap-up. Haven't filmed any wrap-ups because every month has been significantly different in terms of what I've been reading, but I had been planning to just do quarterly wrap-ups rather than monthly wrap-ups since I already have my monthly TBRs. We are going to start because so far it is a pretty long list. I mean, for me at least, I have read 27 books up until this point. Some people that might not be a lot. For me personally, last year I only got to 40 books, so I'm already way ahead of that, and I'm super excited to talk about the books. And to get into the nitty-gritty of analytics, I broke the genres down. So we did 3 nonfiction, 11 romances, 5 fantasies, 1 YA, 4 thrillers, and 3 fiction books. And I read 7 books in January, 6 in February, and 14 in March, which that sums up to 7,658 pages and 27 books read. So I actually put these in the wrong order, so let me just kind of reorganize these really quickly so we can go through them. And I do have quite a few of them here with me, at least the ones that I have read physically. These are the ones I have. The rest have been either audiobooks or I have read on my Kobo or my Kindle. Let's get started. And I'm gonna pull up my Goodreads because I want to see what I rated them. I feel like I forget what I rate books. So the first book was actually like a spirituality book. It's The Untethered Soul, The Journey Beyond Yourself by Michael A. Singer, and I actually listened to this on Audible and I rated this 5 stars. This is just more so of how to free yourself from limitations and just limited perspectives. If you're into any of that, I think this was a really good listen, or if you prefer to read the book, I think it was 100% worth it. Now, the first fiction book that I read this year was You Again by Kate Goldbeck, and I actually DNF'd this book 60% in, and I'm still counting it because 60% in is still pretty good, especially because that book was kind of long. How many pages is it? 448 pages, so I mean not crazy long. But this book, I ended up rating it 2 stars, and I was just not connecting with the characters. I feel like the female main character was not likable for me. I didn't really like her attitude. I didn't like her perspective on life. I don't know, it was just, I was not connecting to the characters. I didn't feel like the characters connected, like the female main character and the male main character. I don't even remember their names, to be honest. I really don't. Josh and Ari. I just was not connecting to that story, and it sucks because that was the first romance fiction book that I read this year. I kind of wanted to keep reading, but at the same time, I don't want to read books that I'm really not enjoying. I want to be okay with DNFing a book. Life is too short to be forcing yourself to read something you're not even remotely enjoying. Next, I read after that 101 Essays That Will Change the Way You Think, also a self-development, self-help book. That was a list. Yeah, I listened to that on Audible, and that was in between books. When I would be in the car, I would listen to it. I rated that 3 stars. I didn't think there was anything special about it. It was just kind of a list of things that you should do to be a good person, I guess. I don't know. I didn't really enjoy it. You do get some valuable information, but nothing out of this world. Next, I read, well, actually this one I listened to on Audible, and it was actually in one of my videos, and I'll put it here, and that was Yellowface. Well, actually, I don't know why it comes up on my Goodreads first, but whatever. I listened to Yellowface and I loved this audiobook. I 100% recommend listening to it because I think that the narrator did an amazing job at narrating this book. I was so into it. I literally listened to it in 2 days, and I was very much hooked. I did this 4.75 stars. This was about, what's her name? I'm so bad with names. June and Athena. Okay, yeah. So June's friend Athena chokes on a pancake, and she is an amazing best-selling author, and June has not been able to get a best-selling book. She's not doing a great, not that she's not doing a great job, but she's just not selling, and she's not as famous as her friend Athena is. So when Athena dies, she basically steals Athena's work and publishes it as her own, and people are onto her on social media and kind of attacking her, and she's on edge at all times because she's oh my god, they're on to me. And yeah, the ending is pretty crazy. The ending is kind of like thrillery, kind of. Really good read. After that, I read Divine Rivals, which was also in the same video that I did for Yellowface. And I actually read this before I finished Yellowface, if I'm not mistaken. Or no, actually, it's because I listened to this on audiobook, so it was in between, like the middle of this. I finished Divine Rivals, and wow, this had been in my physical TBR since like last September, and I can't believe I put it off for so long because this is like my favorite book of all time. I ended up rating this 5 stars, and it's 100% worth the hype. I'm in love with Iris and Roman. So this is just about Iris and Roman, and basically Iris, she comes from a not so wealthy family, and her mom is like a drunk, and she is trying to make the column at the newspaper thing. She's a journalist, and she's just trying to make it big basically. And then Roman is from a wealthy, powerful family, and he's also trying to win the columnist promotion at what's called the Oath Gazette, which is like where they do the newspapers and all that. And they're like rivals. This is enemies to lovers. Her brother goes to war, and then she wants to go to war because she feels like she has nothing in her town to live for anymore. And then Roman kind of goes after her. There's a lot more to it, but I don't want to spoil too much, and it's 1000% worth the read. 5 stars. I don't know why this is so out of order in front of me. Then I read like this is actually another audiobook. It's a little super short audiobook, and it's How to Stay Focused, 10 Untold Remarkably Simple Techniques to Control Your Mind and Stay Focused. And I listened to this literally in one sitting when I was, not a sitting, but I was walking. I was on one of my walks, and I listened to it, and I gave it 4 stars. Nothing special again. And then I read The Berry Pickers, also in the same video as Divine Rivals and Yellowface, and I rated that 3.75 stars. I don't have the physical copy anymore. I actually sold it on my Pango Books because I knew for sure I was never going to read that book again. It was not a book that I would typically reach for, but it did make the best books of 2023 from in Barnes & Noble. So I did read that, and it was about this little girl, Ruth, that she disappeared when she was little. And they're kind of doing like a point of view of the brother and of Ruth, but as adults, and they're remembering their childhood. And basically Joe, which is the brother, is remembering how it was with Ruth when she was there, when she disappeared, and how his life went downhill after that. And then Ruth, which is now Norma, got kidnapped by another family, and she talks about her childhood trauma and how her parents were with her, how emotionally unavailable her mom was with her, and like there was always some weird elephant in the room. It basically just goes through that story until she finally finds out what's going on. It was a really good read, just not something I would typically reach for. That was, I believe, literary fiction as well. Alright, after that I read the continuation of Letters of Enchantment, which was Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. I read this in my finishing series I'm in the middle of, and this was also a 5-star read for me. I know a lot of people had a lot of complaints about this, but I literally loved this book so much. And I don't want to say too much because obviously it's the second book in the duology, so I might spoil things, but it's just more war and politics. It's more of the backstory of why the war was happening, and the first book is more of the romance. There's still romance in here, but the plot here is romance. The plot here is more like the war and basically like the issues that the gods were having, which is why they went to war in the first place. After that, I read, also for the reading books or series that I'm in the middle of, I read Magnolia Park's Into the Dark, and this is the original cover, or not the original cover, but like the old covers. You might be more familiar with, and I'll put the image here, which is the one you'll see at Barnes & Noble. But I rated this 4 stars. I feel like now that time has passed since I made that video and I read this book, I don't think I ever really think about this book. But then again, Magnolia Parks and BJ's books are not my favorite. Daisy Hates are my favorite books, so that's understandable. I still think it was a great read, and I'm not going to lower the rating because there's just so much in this book to unpack, and I think Jessa Hastings' writing is so beautiful and so lyrical that that's why it's so highly rated. And also it's still very entertaining, and I love how it's like character led and more character development, and it's not really just like a plot and you're like, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. 4 stars, but it wasn't my favorite. And then after that we read the The Housemaid by Frida McFadden, and this was a 5-star read. Short little thriller. I read this in 2 days basically, and in like 2 sittings. Really good. I was definitely on edge, and I understand why everybody talks about this thriller. Then after that, I read Tom Lake by Ann Patchett, and I was seeing this around booktube for quite a bit, and I was hesitant because it is literary fiction, I believe, or general fiction. So those are not my type of books, but this cover is so gorgeous that I had to pick it up because it's a Barnes & Noble edition. I had to pick it up when it was released, and I read it. I rated this 3.5 stars. This is about Lara and her 3 daughters during COVID. She is like, the daughters come back home and she's just talking to them about her like young adulthood and how she was almost famous, like she was almost a famous actress, and she met this famous actor, which he wasn't famous when she met him, and she dated him, and she was talking about how that went for her. It was just it wasn't really about that though. It was like more emotional, and just like it had more depth to it, but it was very unemotional and dry for me. So I kept getting bored, and that already, like, I knew I was gonna rate this at least 3 stars or 3.5 as I was reading it, because I just wasn't really thinking about the book. Now that it's been some time since I read it, I read this in the beginning of March. I do think about it actually, because I just, like I said, it's a deep story, and I was honestly like, I was into the book understanding things. It wasn't like I was skimming through it, like I was actually understanding what was going on, and it was like a movie in my head. But the style of writing that Ann Patchett has, there's like lyrical, it's like lyrical, her writing is lyrical, but at the same time it's like kind of dry, and that's why I just couldn't rate it higher than that. All right, and then after that I read A Curse for True Love, which was also for the reading books that I'm in the middle of, and this is the last book in the trilogy of A Once Upon a Broken Heart. And I rated this, what did I rate this? I rated this 4.5 stars, which a lot of people I feel like rated this a little lower and they were disappointed, but I don't know, I don't think I have expectations in series or duologies or trilogies, whatever. I don't have expectations on what I think the author should write about. I understand the critiques about not having enough of Jax in it, but I still really loved it, and I annotated it because I love Stephanie Garber's writing. Then after that I read When in Rome, and I read it for the Finding a Vacation book video, and I rated this 5 stars. This was a shocker to me. I know everyone hyped this up, but again, when people hype up books, I'm so scared to pick them up, and this was worth all the hype. I love this cute little fluffy slow burn rom-com. Like, this is everything, and I can't wait to read the second book in this duology. Such a good read. This is about Amelia and Noah, and Amelia is this famous pop star, and she wants like a break from her famous life. Her car breaks down on the way to this small town, and it breaks down in front of Noah's house. So Noah tries to help her. It's like Grumpy Sunshine, but not like the annoying type of grumpy. Obviously they fall in love and whatever, but it's such a good read. And then I read Half a Soul, which I also read for that vacation book video, and I thought this was like historical romance, but I've also heard it's like Regency romance. I don't really know what that even means, but I rated this 4.75 stars. I really liked this book, and it was about Theodora Eddings. She has no sense of emotions or like basically fear or embarrassment, and it was because a fairy took half of her soul, and now she just doesn't have that side of her. So this kind of goes through her life with this problem, and meeting, also just trying to meet a guy in like a high society that is gonna accept her that way, but her cousin is trying to meet a guy, and her cousin like loves her dearly and is always trying to protect Theodora, and just there's so much more to that. If you want to hear all the details, watch that video because it's like a little complicated to understand, but such a good read. It does have like old English, so I feel like you need a tiny bit more brain power when reading this book. It was a short read, not even 300 pages, so I highly recommend. It's nothing like I've ever read, and I really enjoyed this book. And then after that I read the novella in this book, which is actually in this book at the end, and it's The Lord Sorcerer, and it just talks talks about the two male main characters in this book and like before this time. So it was like a sequel. Yeah, it was like really boring. I rated that 3 stars, and I think I only rated it 3 stars because there was like this one quote that really hit, but it was super boring, to be honest. All right, after that I read Rock Paper Scissors by Alice Feeney, and I ended up rating this 5 stars. Such a good thriller. Again, another book that I was not picking up because I was so scared that it was overhyped, but it is so worth it. And this is about Mr. and Mrs. Wright. They are having marriage issues and they go on a weekend vacation to try to make things right, but things go south from there. And wow, I mean, this is such an unpredictable story. I don't think there's any way to predict the ending of this book. I just realized that I'm not even saying these in order because I just missed like a few. And I don't know why I missed these, but in between like Divine Rivals and The Berry Pickers, I guess it's because I was also listening to audiobooks. I feel like this year I'm reading like 5 books at the same time, so sorry. But I also read Heartless. This was for a video also that I read, trying to read my monthly TBR in 1 week. So this is the second book in the Chestnut Spring series, and I ended up rating this 3.5 stars. This was like single dad trope, single dad nanny trope. And I don't know, I think that I just really love Elsie Silver's writing, so it was a good book, but I just wasn't into it as much as I was into Flawless, which was the first book. So that's why I had to rate it 3.5 stars because I don't know, it just didn't like captivate me like the first book did. But I know this is a lot of people's favorite book, so, and it is kind of a thick one. I also listened to like half of that on Audible. Then I listened to One of Us is Dead by Geneva Rose. I listened to that on Audible and that was so much fun. That was such a fun book. That was like about, I don't know if it was like 4 women or I don't know how many women, but they're just friends and it's just like rich housewives gossipy, and then there's a murder, and it's just so much fun. I don't even know how to explain that book, but it was just such a fun listen. I don't know how I would have felt if I read it, but listening to it was definitely entertaining. And I also read Daughter of the Moon Goddess. I read that on my Kobo. This book I rated 5 stars and I adored this book. I don't know if it's because I sat there and I read it for like 4 hours straight, but I love this book, and this was a long one. Like this was 503 pages, the hardcover, bigger book, but in my Kobo it was like 1,000 pages. It was so much fun, and I also read that for trying to read my monthly TBR in 1 week video. This is a little complicated to explain, I feel like, but basically the main character is like hidden from the world. Like she lives on the moon with her mom, and her mom like hides the truth from her. One day the mom tells her like, hey, I've been hiding you from the world because I've been trying to protect you, but like you need to leave because they're going to notice that like I've been hiding you this whole time. Because basically her mom is like a immortal and so is she, and so they had no idea that this daughter existed because basically her dad disappeared and he was like this very powerful man. He was also the Celestial Empress's like rival, so if they would have found out that the female main character was alive, like she would have been killed. So kind of goes through her journey of her trying to in disguise kind of live and make a name for herself. And yeah, that wasn't the best description ever, but it's just such a great read and you need to read it. It does have a lot of Chinese folklore as well, and I really enjoyed that side of it. Going back to trying to get back in order. So after Rock Paper Scissors, I read on my Kindle The Worst Wingman Ever, which is part of the Improbable Meet Cute little series that Amazon had with different authors for Valentine's Day, and I rated that 4 stars. I really like that. That's by Abby Jimenez, and I love Abby Jimenez's writing. Then I listened to on Audible The Exception to the Rule, which is also part of the Improbable Meet Cute by Christina Lauren, and I rated that 3 stars. And then Rosie and the Dreamboat is by Sally Thorne, and that's also part of that series, and I rated that 2 stars. I also listened to that on Audible, and I don't know, it just didn't hit for me. And I feel like I don't even need to give you a description because they're just so short. They're like an hour and a half. They're literally little novellas. And then Throttled by Lauren Asher. I finally read that. I have the physical copy here. So I read Throttled by Lauren Asher. I rated this 3 stars. It was a fun, entertaining read, but nothing out of this world. I didn't absolutely love it, and there were times where I was kind of like, I don't know, like it was entertaining enough for me to read, but it wasn't something like, I wasn't like hooked, you know. I was just like reading it and I was like, okay, cool, like, but nothing crazy stood out to me. All Right, and then after that I listened to With Any Luck, which is also part of the Improbable Meet Cute series, and I rated that 2 stars. That's by Ashley Poston. Then I read Done and Dusted by Kobo. I rated that 3 stars, and I was expecting like Chestnut Springs Flawless vibes, and it was again a cute, entertaining book. At first, like the first 15 chapters I was really into it, and then I don't know, it was just like kind of predictable. It was kind of like not giving, I don't know, like it was a good read, but it wasn't like anything out of this world. I feel like it is kind of hyped up in my opinion. I know people adore this book. I'm still gonna read the second one just to see what the vibes are, but I don't know if it's just because I was reading like a lot and that's why I was kind of like bored of it. But then I listened to Drop, Cover, and Hold On by Jasmine Guillory. I don't know how to pronounce her name, I'm sorry. And I rated that 3 stars. That's also part of the Improbable Meet Cute. And then I read The Housemaid's Secret by Frida McFadden, which is the second book in the Housemaid, I don't know if that's a series, trilogy, or a duology. And I rated this 4 stars. I really did enjoy this book. I love how quick the chapters are. It's literally 1, 2, 3 pages. And thrillers are just so fast paced and I love that. However, I do feel like I enjoyed the first one more. There's times where I'm just like with the main character, I'm like, you already know better than this. Why are you making this mistake? But I still enjoyed it. 4 stars. And that's basically all for my little quarterly wrap up